Hello, everyone. Huge thank you for joining us today on our discussion for understanding how engineering orgs can achieve reliability in 2023. This is a LeadDev webinar created in partnership with Sauce Labs, and it's going to last about 45 minutes. We're going to be answering questions. We have a bunch of pre-brainstormed content. And we'll try to go through all of that. We'll then at the 45-minute mark move to the LeadDev Slack to answer any more questions in the building software channel. So we probably will have a couple of minutes to answer questions live. I'm hoping so. So if you want to submit those through the Q&A Zoom feature, that'd be great. And we can try to tack those on at the end. If we don't get to them, we'll pop them into the channel and we'll answer them in channel. So we are going to get started because we only have a limited amount of time. So my name is Maude. I'm a senior staff engineer at Slack. I've been there for a little while. I lead our load testing efforts among a bunch of other things. And today I'm going to be joined with this fabulous crew of people. And we will kick things off with Marcus. Tell us about yourself.
All right. Hi, I'm Marcus Merrill. I'm the Vice President of Technology Strategy at Sauce Labs. And sort of my job after a 20-year career in quality assurance test automation is to sort of come to Sauce Labs and help people do what I tried to do when I was in quality assurance. So we have a platform for helping people execute automated tests, but there's also a lot of other pieces that people need, and we try to fill in the gaps through thought leadership and knowledge, and just trying to make the process as smooth as we possibly can and help everyone release better software.
Fabulous. So it's great to have Sauce Labs here also. Next up, Usha.
Hi, I'm Usha. I'm an engineering manager at Sculpture Capital. I'm passionate about building cool software. I feel like a wizard when I do that, like in Harry Potter and Gandalf. But what I believe in is having that cool software application being backed by high quality code, which is stable and has a long life. And I believe in doing that by culture building and having a team that's focused on high velocity.
Fabulous. And Reggie, the SRE hat.
Yeah. I'm the long SRE. Hey, everybody. My name is Reggie Davis. I'm currently at Elastic. I'm a senior SRE, and I am the tech lead of the core SRE team for our platform engineering. And so a lot of the work that I focus on is really about kind of how do we shift left on reliability, right, through processes and working with, the control, the platform teams and the developers, and as well as infra engineers about how can we kind of create processes that can kind of pretty much glue everything together so that we can pretty much deliver a higher quality service for our end users. So I'm very glad to be here. Very, very glad to be here.
That's not a high pressure job at all. From that description, no big deal, whatever, it's all good. Especially in light of 2023. So obviously it's from the title of the panel. By 2023, I think a lot of us are sort of on the same page that really this means the season of the tech downturn, the layoffs that we keep hearing about and seeing. And that's where I want to start. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room that is the layoffs and how this impacts how we're thinking about reliability. And actually, I'm curious to see for folks who are listening in the Zoom chat, if you can chime in, whether layoffs have impacted you at all. I'm sure it's impacted people on my team in the last couple months. And I'm sure it's impacted all of you on the call in some way, shape, or form. So how have you been experiencing those headwinds at your own companies? And how has that shifted your thinking about reliability, if at all? And I think from our sort of brainstorming call that we had last week, Marcus, you had some insightful thoughts, I thought, about QA and how that fits into the layoff situation typically.
Well, I mean, yeah. I guess the way it seems that QA fits into the layoffs is that we are the first to go in a layoff. I'm just constantly marveling at the fact that every week there's a headline about another software glitch, another problem, another performance issue, and software all over seems to be like failing, falling down, and at least coming up short. Whenever you use your phone to dial in an app or use something, there's a good chance you're going to be angry by how the performance of the software goes at some point during the day, and yet QA is the first to go. And so I'm trying to figure out, why is that? Is it because we're not recognized for the geniuses we are? We're not working hard enough? We're not considered relevant? I don't know why it is, but it sure seems to be the case. So what do y'all think? I'm baffled.
I have a lot of opinions about that. I feel like QAs and SREs are kind of in the same boat. Like when it comes to understanding the value that comes with having a QA, or even I know me personally as an SRE, I love working with my QAs because it gives me more insight to a part of the software that I don't normally have insight to, right? And so through that relationship, we're able to create better processes. And I think sometimes it can be hard to quantify that value at times for, maybe sometimes senior leadership or people that may not understand, because you're looking at the profits, you're looking at rolling out the new feature, you're looking at those things, but you're not looking at, hey, what is the experience like for the people that we've already captured, right? Like, how do we continue to deliver on the experience that captured them that first time? Right. And when you're thinking of, okay, well, let me roll out these new features, let me do these things, you're not thinking about the people you've already attained. And so I think that's why sometimes the QAs and the SREs and people that really focus on like quality assurance, reliability, people like that kind of get overlooked. You know what I'm saying? They kind of get overlooked because I did lose somebody on my team. You know what I'm saying? I did lose somebody, and we already had a small team and there wasn't any backfills coming. So, it's really kind of been like this journey of how do we learn how to, work smarter with much less resources.
I have something to add there. I see that we are losing QA a lot lately, but I feel like it's been happening for a while now. It's not just a new problem with these layoffs, but then slowly, without anybody knowing, it's been happening for a while. And it comes with the concept of extreme ownership. Whoever writes the code owns the code, and they need to know the in and out of the code, and they need to know everything that can potentially go wrong. The biggest problem that I see with that approach is, as a developer, I know a little bit of the code. And when a new developer comes in, they also know the little bit of the code that they work with. Yeah, I know the code that I write very intimately, but at the same time, I don't know what impact it has on the holistic application. Especially with a big organization, it's going to cause a severe impact if the small change that I make is impacting a bigger system. So, for that reason, I think we need to look at the ownership a little differently. And I think QA is a very important role in making an application stable in the short term and also in the long term.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, go ahead.
I'm curious about your experience, Mode.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to come. So I've worked on performance related tooling and that sort of thing for a long time now. And it's interesting to see that you don't really it's harder to be rewarded when you prove that you prevented an incident or you prevented some sort of problem, rather than I made this new feature that gave us X new customers, or it like brought in X more money. Like that feels much more provable than like, oh, well, all of this preventative work that we did, like we didn't have these incidents. You can't really prove that you didn't have these incidents because you did all that work. Yeah. And that's something that so many people have that I've worked with have sort of run into issues with in terms of advocating for more, not even before the layoffs, just advocating for more headcount on their teams to prove that like, oh, if we invest all this time in this project, then like we really think it'll help us not have as many incidents with our databases being overloaded. But like, it's a big lift. It's going to cost a lot of money, but it's fine now. It's fine now.
Yep. It's always fine for now. It's always fine for now.
Yeah, it just makes me think. My blood boils a little bit whenever I hear QA considered a cost center. And I think that everyone who is in the audience who hears a phrase like that thrown around needs to push back with, we may not generate or grow revenue, but we sure protect it. And we are risk management. We are not janitors. And I think it's going to take a shift in perspective at the ground boots level as well as the executive level. And I think that we're not going to be able to change this perspective or continue to be at risk of layoffs unless we change this perspective.
It's the leaky bucket analogy for me, right? Of like, you've accumulated all of these customers, they're in this bucket, but if you have a bajillion holes, it's not going to stay in there very long.
They're gonna just slowly start leaking out, and that's really kind of what that's really what it is. Like, you know, as SRE, that's how I view it, right? Like, it's because it's like, if I get on this platform and over the next year you've released all of these features, but the thing that brought me here doesn't work the way it used to work, or it's not consistent, or the performance is spotty, or whatever it is, it's kind of like that makes it way easier for me to, let me just hop to another platform. But granted, you know, it's also very difficult too, because it really depends on, you know, whatever your product or your service is, what does that mean to that end user? You know, where is it at? Being here at Elasticsearch, we're a very, you know, we're a very important part of a lot of people's stack, you know? And so transitioning from Elasticsearch to another competitor, like you got to take that to some people and have some serious conversations about that. So we kind of, you know, we leverage that a little bit, but at some point, you know, with a lot of these newer companies leveraging newer technologies with, you know, different types of integrations, like people I could just go over OpenSearch, right? Like, because my architecture may allow for it. Maybe the way I develop this part of the application, it allows for that easy exchange. And that's, you know, and at that point, it does become very important to maintain what got you there. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is your runway as a company? Like, are we here to just get bought, or are we here to, at some point, like, we want to be here for the next 20 years? And if you want to be here for the next 20 years, right, at that point, you have to have a different approach. I'm not here for 4 or 5 years so I can be bought by somebody. Hey, I'm here to be a sustainable company for another decade. And if I'm going to be that, then guess what? I got to keep those people happy along the way. And so now I think that's a very different shift, because a lot of companies, you know, when we think about a lot of these companies, these are a lot of younger companies. Even when I think about Elasticsearch is kind of like it's like a young vet, if you will. You know, it's like they've been in the league for maybe 8 years, but they're not in here for like 15, 20 years. They're not super old, but they're old enough to know. Right. And so these are just this is new spaces for, I think, a lot of us and a lot of these companies and what we're doing right now. So but I'm right there with y'all. Like, we got to keep those people happy as we grow. So.
Yeah, no. And go ahead, Usha.
So I agree with everything that's being said. All that I wanted to add was QA is like a thankless job, but at the same time, I think it helps. Like, what I have seen help a little bit is, you know, when we develop features, there is like, we have to get this done in this time. Attaching at least to the definition of done, attaching at least, saying at least cover the PO test cases, understanding what P0 test cases, what P1 test cases, and what P3 is. At least attaching the importance, saying your feature is not done, or your work as a developer is not complete, unless you and somebody else have worked together, in at least having a PO or P1 automation in place. That kind of helps take the stress out, or and saying and adding value to it, making it part of a process helps a lot.
That actually starts to answer, I think, one of the questions that just came in that I'm going to throw in here because it's very related, from Eva. Hope I'm saying that right. Totally hear where you're coming from regarding the benefits of QA, but which kinds of teams would you say it's enough for devs to do their own QA? So during code review, when should a team first consider a dedicated QA role? And so I think, given the context of, like, we have tighter constraints on the resources that we have, maybe our QA team no longer exists, keeping that in mind, what do you think?
the thing that we did in one of my previous teams is we did not have dedicated QA. I think, Maud, you can agree, you work for Salesforce. I think it's a similar situation for you too. So what we did there was throw in a senior developer or the senior most person who has worked with that application before, who can give you a holistic view of the application itself, somebody who understands the application well, write out the test cases. Again, not all test cases are created equal. Some of them are more important than the others. Some of them can be handled by easier automation than the others. So figuring these out with somebody who knows, who's the senior most dev, is important. Again, if you're working with a legacy application, things change because not everything the existing infrastructure is not modular enough that you can, whip up a quick unit test. So for those applications, you need a more end-to-end tests that run well. So maybe at that point, you need a more dedicated QE. It depends on how hard the work is and how important the test case is to write an end-to-end test case for it. And a lot of what I'm trying to say, I guess, is a lot of factors go into making a decision. And some of the important factors that I think are the work that you're doing, how does it fit into the big application? How many P0s, how many end-to-end tests do you need? How many integration and the test pyramid from there goes on. If you can handle it with unit tests, very good. But having that understanding is very important of what constitutes which test, and why is it important to write those tests then?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of unit tests. I think that if you have unit testing in place, then that helps a lot. But what I guess I feel like when I was listening to Usha talk, I feels like what I would think of is, if I am a small team that is sort of I almost want to call it a terminal microservice, where I don't have a lot of dependencies on other things, but there are a lot of stuff dependent on me. Potentially, you could probably not have a dedicated QA, because you could do the unit testing and not worry that you're going to cause a cascading catastrophic failure for other teams. But if you're kind of at the base of the tree and your dependency is upon dozens or hundreds of other kinds of microservices, your work is going to be more holistic in nature, and you're going to have to understand all the dependencies and how they relate to each other. That's when I would probably want a specialist in quality assurance. That's kind of a swag, and I don't think I've ever had that kind of deliberate thought when I've been working on a team on a day-to-day basis. But that's when I would start to look at. I always come back to risk. What is the risk of the thing we're doing? And when you're talking about the P0 features, I learned really late in my career at my previous job that, like, of the 800 Selenium test cases I had written, 12 of them were critical. And if I had never run any of the other 788 tests, I'm not sure anything would be different. Like, even if they had failed, I'm not sure it would have sent up a red flag, I think it's really figuring out where the risk to the business is and where you need that specialist who's going to be able to look outside the role of what your developers are doing on your team and look at everything else that's going on and what the user experience needs to be like. That was kind of a long answer, but that's sort of what it feels like.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Reggie, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was like, no, that makes perfect sense. It's almost like a platform specialist, right? And I would think that, like, that person will almost be in a role almost like an architect. So I know some people have like architect committees and things like that, but that would be a person that would be fit, like, hey, you make sure you understand the different test cases and like all of the critical points, right? And then you kind of resolve that problem. But I just thought it was a really great point.
That sounds like a fun job to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, no, we have a similar panel. Reggie, I'm curious, from an SRE perspective, something that came up for me while listening to Marcus talk about these like 788 test cases that like really probably didn't matter. One thing that I feel like probably some engineers are like spending some brain cycles on that maybe they shouldn't be spending brain cycles on, which is a way to maybe be more efficient and maybe ultimately lead to stable, higher reliability, is responding to like noisy alerts, bad alerts, flaky tests, all this sort of heap of just stuff that we get thrown at us, that we're like, oh, this is pointless. Why do we still have this alert? Or like, oh, this test is broken again. Like, and I'm just curious to get your thoughts on like should we be investing time in just like clearing all of our alerts and only having the most important ones right now?
You know, I'm just saying, if you had an alarms going off around your house, would you just walk around and not tend to the alarms that are going off in your home? Right? Like, it's like this thing. I always tell people, you know, at the end of the day, software is like a house, right? It might take you 6 months to build a house. You're going to live in this house for 30 years. Okay. Over the course of these 30 years, it's going to be all kinds of knick-knack paddywhacks. They're going to go off, go left, this, that, whatever it is. And if you want the home to last for 30 years, you have to tend to these things. It's the same thing with our software. If you're seeing these noisy alerts, if you're seeing these flaky tests, don't just snooze it or resolve it and keep it moving. Like, tend to it. These are the checkpoints, and these are the checks and the balances that we've established, right? That says, hey, we should look into this. There may be an issue for our customer that we may not be seeing, and we should at least be able to investigate it, right? And there should definitely always be an investment for that. That's no different than setting, you know, a couple $100 or $1,000, however much money to the side to make sure you have money, you know, emergency funds in case something goes wrong with your house. It's the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So why would you treat, you know what I'm saying, your money, make your home essentially any differently? So absolutely, yes. Answer, pay attention to those things. Like,
I met oh, go ahead, Usha. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I did not realize. So I had something to add to that. So I've seen a lot of time when people chase down metrics like, oh, we need to have 100% unit test coverage, or say we need to have this many end-to-end tests. Most of the time, that is when these things happen, that you end up with a lot of flaky tests, and then your whole test suite becomes so brittle that you don't care about it, because you know it's just so annoying at that point. This is why education is really important, like consensus among the team saying this is going to be in my end-to-end test case. This test I really care about. This is going to be in my integration or unit test. This is how I'm going to structure it, and I care about these. And when something test becomes flaky and you snooze it, that's when you know it's no longer important, because it might be a P3, like Marcus said. If you snooze it, you really don't care about it. And if it breaks, nobody is going to really ask you about it. So maybe take it out and forget about it. At that point, you only have the things that are important to you.
Yeah. I worked with a guy. Sorry, I didn't work with a guy. I met a guy at a conference about 2 months ago who said that he works in the Center of Excellence team, and there's a bunch of teams that contribute automated tests, Selenium Appium. And he had 15,000 tests that he is responsible for executing every single day. And I said, okay, wow, I mean, that's a lot of tests. What's your pass rate? Thinking I was going to hear 99.6, 99.7. His pass rate was 70%. So he runs 15,000 tests, 10,500 of them pass, 4,500 of them fail. And I said, are you prepared for some bad news? Your tests are worthless. And then I corrected myself. No, your tests aren't worthless. Your tests are worse than worthless. They're not zero, they're negative, because you are representing coverage of features to your organization that you actually cannot make any definitive statement about. You're doing nothing but introducing risk to your company when your whole job is to mitigate and eliminate risk. So start over, or different job, or I don't know. I know it's easy for me to sit here and say, but I've had to do this before. You have to purge.
That's just the game. You know what? And also, and to add to your point, you know, one thing I think about a lot is, like, I think we've gotten into this weird space where there's too much forward thinking and not enough reflecting, right? So we're always thinking forward, we're always moving the thing forward, but we never take the time to actually reflect on the decisions that we're actually making. and we're running around with these broken mental models of how things work, and they don't work the way we thought they were, or that the mental model that we initially had, informs us of how it worked. And we need to be constantly, teams, service owners need to constantly be putting in that time to reflect on the decision that they made. Hey, once a quarter, once a year, reflect on this. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you have to change anything, but make sure your mental model is up to date, or else, to the point, you got all of these flaky and these broken tests, and you just snooze them or whatever, and they just serve no purpose for anybody. And it actually is going to make it harder for anybody to come in behind you, right? Because now you're getting this, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, like, and that's just what it is. So I think there should just be more reflecting and not so much forward thinking when it comes to, looking at tests and reviewing these things. And we just got to build better habits of that. But that just requires a lot of discipline too. So, but that's a story for another day.
Fantastic point. Really good.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think too, especially in this time of we have to be doing more with less, I feel like people are finding like, oh, maybe we don't need this process anymore. We don't need to do these quarterly retros anymore. We don't need to, like, where can I save time? Where can I do less? And yeah, I think like this reflection piece, you're spot on, is a piece where I'm pretty sure probably people are skimping right now. And like, it's actually even more important than ever to do them and to be really mindful about all of the investment that you're putting in. And like, because things are changing so fast too, the landscape is changing so fast. Sure, we want to be like in this like go, go, go headspace, but things are just moving around a lot. I want to jump back to something that you mentioned, Reggie, when we talked last week, because I thought it was a really great idea, also just full of great ideas today. You mentioned, because I was asking the group, like, in what ways are you doing more with less on your teams, very practically speaking, right now? And you talked about how you are sort of pretending more than your team is your team. You're reaching out to other teams and sort of consolidating efforts across the organization as a means of getting things done. And I thought that was really, I'd love for you to elaborate on that for everyone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, let me just give you some context. I'm on a team of essentially 4. It's a manager, myself, which I'm the tech lead, and I have 2 other engineers. And when I first got on a team, it was like a team of like 8, 9 people. Like I was like, this is the biggest team I've ever gotten on. And over time, man, we just lost people, due to layoffs and things of that nature, people moving to other teams. And what ended up happening was that we ended up having a lot of responsibility placed on our team in a very short amount of time. In a very, very short amount of time. And as a result, you trying to churn that midnight oil, trying to accomplish all of these things. And what's going to eventually happen is you're going to burn out, right? So, and you just don't have it. It's not enough hours in the day. It's not enough time. It's not enough whatever. So one of the things that we had to do as we kind of matured in our processes and our mindsets is we began to look at other teams and other efforts and saying, hey, how can we collaborate with other teams so that we can get more done? How can we bring tools in, or how can we create integrations that allow us to leverage other teams and maybe their expertise in something in a way that we wouldn't be able to have on our own team, right? Because we're not going to get the backfields. We're not going to get, nobody's coming in and, oh, we're going to give because like I said, they treat QAs they treat SREs like QA. So it's kind of like, how do you quantify like, hey, I need more headcount when I'm not pumping out a new feature every week, right? So, as a result, it's kind of like, okay, cool. Like, I know there are other teams that may have an interest in this project, or may have some things to say about this. How can we work together with them? And maybe we can collaborate. We can kind of brainstorm, and we can all kind of get to a goal, kind of this unified vision together, and that's been a big thing. So, really reaching out and creating relationships cross-functionally across teams and getting kind of understand a little bit about what they got going on, what their roadmap is, and seeing how you can kind of fit into that. And now you can kind of start strategizing with other teams, building relationships with other teams, accomplishing the same thing. Team size is still the same, but hey, this team said, hey, man, we've been trying to move over to, this new service catalog tool we want to use. Okay, cool. Like, how can we work together to accomplish that together? Okay, I'll work on this end, you work on that end. And when we all come together, we all win. And that's just the game, and we can put it on the roadmap. So it's just a matter of, building relationships and strategizing and just seeing like kind of what can we all gain out of this? Because at the end of the day, we still work for the same company. We still getting the check. At the end of the day, the check is going to say the company's name on it. It's not going to say my name on it. It's not going to say your name on it. It's not going to say your team's name on it. That's not how it works. So if we can all win together, maybe we can get more done with less. And I think that's the only way you're going to get more done with less in this climate that we're in. We have to have more collaborative environments. You can't have these environments where back 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you can have teams in their own silos because they had enough resources. Like I said, when I first got on my team, it was a team of 8 to 10 people. So yeah, you can have your own silo in that world, but when your team gets shrunk down to 4 people, 5 people, or something like that, or maybe half of what it was, it's going to get more imperative for you to be able to collaborate because you're stronger. You're stronger when there's more people behind you. You know what I'm saying? When it's 10 people moving as one versus one person moving as an individual, like you just kind of got to get back into those collaborative environments.
Do you or anyone else on the panel have any suggestions on how to try to get people more open to that idea? Because something that I think is a very natural reaction to these sort of headwinds is to sort of turtle shell, like sort of be really protective of your part of the code base, try to be extra vigilant of the stuff that you're working on, and not really let other people in and be very just hyper focused on what you're working on, probably as a means of self-preservation, but also maybe in light of, I need these features that I'm working on to be like super well tested, super reliable, so that everything looks really slick and works for our customers as best as it can. And the only way that I can ensure that is if I do it myself this way and no one else is coming in. I think it's a completely natural way to react to this stuff. And so I would love to know, how can you like open up those people? How can you approach them and sort of help them see that actually collaboration is the way forward, and that closing themselves in like that is not going to be helpful? Yeah.
I think the problem is not that people want to test their code really well, but I really think the problem is that people want to build more features as a point. As an act of self-preservation, they want to build more and more features. So the way to opening them up, the need to opening up would be to write these kinds of automation, right? So I feel like having days where we can all get together and the company can say, hey, let's have a test day where you put out all these things that need to be tested, and let's see what kind of tests you want them to be. And then in the company, different people with different skill set can hit as many tests as they can. You can just have a doc or something out there that people write their name on, then just build automation. That'll be a fun day. People who build the most maybe get a prize or something. Incentivizing these actions, making it a fun collaborating effort where there is a panel or group of experts who can advise you on these on how to approach, would be a good learning opportunity, as well as there is learning there in understanding what value this kind of things add to your work.
I love that.
I think I kind of have two answers that I'll try to keep short. One is, I think you can always get people to open up. I'm almost by asking them for help. Making people feel needed is a good way to, like, if you're trying to tell them something all the time, that's not going to help. If you need something from them and you ask out of earnestness and you are genuinely interested in getting help from them, I find that generally tends to open up people. Not everyone, but most people. And then the other thing is I've looked for, like, when I've had the inclination to turtle shell, is I try to go a little bit lateral in terms of, if I'm working with an open source tool, I find that there's community within the open source tool, and you can get involved with the development of that tool and reach out to that community. And that doesn't just mean code contributions. It could mean documentation, unit tests, contribute to it, get to know that community, get on their Slack, get on their IRC channel, get on their Discord, and make that community of people your commiserating coworkers that you've lost. I think those are two interesting ways to deal with the pressures that we've seen.
That's a really good point. I had not thought about that at all.
No, it's been very helpful for me to be involved with the Selenium community for the last 15 years. It's been fantastic.
Reggie, did you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, no. I would definitely love to hear my thoughts as well. But yeah, no, for sure. I think to everyone's point, I think it's a matter of culture, right? It's a matter of culture building around that. I think one thing that I know we've been trying to get a lot better about is getting more organized around space time, right? So having these days, maybe once a quarter or whatever it is, where different people from different teams or whatever can get together and they can kind of organize themselves around, hey, like, let's sit down, let's talk about this problem, or let's sit down, let's see how we can kind of navigate this. Like, what can we do around that? And building a little bit of culture around it, right? Because sometimes it's hard to go from 0 to 1 when it comes to these situations, because to your point, like when people turtle shell, right? I get it, because I'm quite the Ninja Turtle myself. You know, when you turtle shell, there has to be an incentive as to, why am I coming out? Is there food out here? No. Is there water out here? No. Okay, cool. So y'all want to go outside and do what? So it's like, so in order for that to happen, like, you know, sometimes that incentive can be just, hey, just come and just relax. Let me just relax. Let me just get you out the shell and make you feel, hey, we're not trying to ask you to do more work. Let me start there, right? Once you get past that, then you can kind of build that culture around, okay, cool. Like, how do we get better at working together? Because if I like you, I'm probably going to be a lot more apt to want to work with you. You're going to be way more tolerable. Like, that's just what it is. Like, that's just human behavior. That's not even an app can't change that. So so it's just kind of like, if I actually know who you are, and a lot of times it comes to understanding like the common threads between who people are and understanding people's struggle. Because sometimes you'll be struggling looking at something and they struggling looking at it, but because y'all are in different rooms, right? It doesn't mean y'all perspectives, we've seen the same thing. We're just in different positions. And sometimes having that space time, and sometimes kind of having that kind of like that space for people to kind of just talk and vent and express these things, you'll be able to kind of find a lot of different common threads, as well as, you know, learn about people. So I think just getting around stuff, like, even if it's once a quarter, you know what I'm saying? Like an hour for once a quarter, that's crazy. I think it should be, I think every 2 weeks or something, like a natural cadence works better, because people kind of are creatures of habit. So if they can kind of put it in their schedule, they'll kind of run with it. But yeah, like, just getting more organized around those kinds of activities across teams and across the organization. Because you got people, like, I know at our company, we got like 3,000 engineers. So it's like, what? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I will never, like, I'm like, yo, I'm probably have talked to like maybe 100. And how do I even get into that space? But you kind of have to create a habit of coming together and doing those things. And then that 3,000 doesn't seem as daunting, because then you do 3,000 over the course of 5 years or however long you're at your company. Now, all of a sudden, it's not as crazy, right?
Yeah.
But if you just look at it off the top, it's like, whoa, that's a lot of people to get to know. No, you don't need to know that. Just get to know one person this week, and then another person another week, and another person another week. Next thing you know, a year, 2 years has passed, and you know 50, 100 engineers. Maybe you're not the best of friends with them, but you know of them. You know the work that they do. You know if they got a family. You know what I'm saying? You know, like, they have things going on. It makes it much easier to reach out to them and say, hey, can we collaborate on something? I got an idea I want to run off of you. Can we work together? Because that's all this stuff is. At the end of the day, it's just conversations. we can sit here and talk about tools all day we want, but at the end of the day, it's still relationships. It's still people behind the tool.
Yeah.
So like it's not changing. I don't care if AI come in and take everything over. It's still a person behind it. Like it's still going to be people around here doing things, building relationships and negotiating on things. So we have to create spaces for that. So, you know, space time once a quarter, space time, whatever, just something every 2 weeks, something. And that's going to allow that turtle shell to kind of, all right, cool. Like, let me get out. Cause now I just want to be out because I like the people around me versus I'm getting out only for food and water.
Oh man. Yeah. I think, man, we could end on that, honestly, but we do have a couple more minutes and a couple more questions. So we'll get to those. But wow, man, I feel like we should have just ended on that. Anyway, very astute observations. I could not agree more. I feel in a similar boat sometimes. When I started working at Slack, we were around 100 engineers. We were in like one floor of this one office building in San Francisco. And now I've been fully remote for like over 3 years, and we're like over 1,000 engineers. And I teach onboarding every couple of weeks. So that's how I get to know new folks, which has been really great. But otherwise it's really daunting. And I don't know about you all, but like I may present as an extrovert sometimes, but I have my moments and then I need to like turtle shell back in. And I think for a lot of us, it can be really hard to like put ourselves out there, but it is a really, really good reminder. So on that note, I'm going to spin us back a little bit, sort of bring us back to, I think this threads really well actually off of your point, Usha, about having like a testing day and sort of incentivizing everyone to just like knock off a couple items off a Google spreadsheet or something somewhere. So Olivier had a question in the chat. So he says, in our company, most of the end-to-end QA is performed by the verification and validation team. How much are, I guess, all of you automating the QA part? How do you approach this automation? Who is responsible for the automation? And something that came up for me when I was reading that and hearing you, Usha, talk about this testing day, if you have this big spreadsheet of everyone's writing all these tests and you're sort of writing tests for various, ideally probably parts of the code that you understand and parts of the features that you understand, but you might tackle something that's like sort of tangentially related and you just add a test case for that. You're on the get blame for that. What happens when someone comes along later and is like, this test is broken? I made the mistake of just moving the Slack login code into a different file at some point. And then I was on the get blame for the Slack login code for months before anyone else changed it. And that was a great time.
So, a couple of things, right? Change is like part of what we work. Projects, priorities, and people always change. So nothing you write is you're going to be responsible forever, right? There's no such thing. So I guess the question is, if you write something and you get asked a question on it, when you write a test case, you would know what team owns it. So you can always redirect people to the team that owns the feature now versus you answering that question yourself. But also, if it's just about the test, what does this test do? I think you're the best person to answer that question anyway. I hope that kind of answers it.
Do you think, and maybe Marcus, you have ideas about this given your QA expertise and Sauce Labs experience, who broadly is responsible for the automation? So at varying levels.
Right. I mean, we see all kinds, but when you start to say V&V, that becomes a very, very particular thing. And usually you have a compliance officer. I wish I knew more about it. Honestly, I've never worked in a regulated entity like that. And we have a lot of customers who are in that kind of a space. And all I know is that risk analysis is a very fundamental part of what they do. I don't see evidence of a huge amount of automation in the V&V test space. I think there should be more, but it always feels like people almost don't want to trust automation to that. I think that might be fading over time. I haven't got recent huge critical mass of data. I'm just thinking about a couple of examples. But it feels like fundamentally it's a similar kind of exercise that you'd go through for any kind of test automation, but with just a little bit more expectation of visibility that you're going to have to publish a dashboard, maybe constantly. So you're going to be almost designing for show, which is unusual for testing. Usually you're used to being isolated. So I don't have real specifics, unfortunately, but I do think that it's a fantastic question, and I'd love to study it more, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at time, but AI, like how, just to be a broken record.
It sounds like we need to have another webinar.
Like, how is that going to impact this whole space? I know there's people at Slack experimenting with automated unit test writing via AI by feeding our code base into some GPT systems. And that's a whole thing. Maybe that is part of how we get more efficient, but maintain a certain level of test coverage, reliability. Will we have to give over to the robots? I don't know.
The person engineering the prompt definitely has to know the difference between garbage out and good out. I mean, we wrote a blog article recently about GPT to produce automated test code using Cucumber, and it was great. And honestly, a competitor of ours wrote a blog article about the same thing, and it was terrible. The person writing the article did not know the difference between good Cucumber code and bad Cucumber code. And bad Cucumber code is an insidious disease upon any QA organization. When it's good, it's good. Most of it's bad. So you got to know the difference.
Yeah, there's a very subtle difference. No, yeah, it makes a huge difference. All right, so yes, we are at time. If anyone listening has more AI questions to take to the channel, please take them to the channel. If you have follow-up questions on the questions that we answered here, please also take them to the channel. We're going to be there for another 10-ish minutes. And with that, I will let all of you go. Thank you so much for attending. Hopefully you join more LeadDev panels in the future. I know I had a great time talking to all these folks. I wish it was a whole other hour longer. And we will see you all on Slack.